Every single second, the world resets. At the stroke of midnight, an invisible wall rises, rendering yesterday's secrets useless and tomorrow's survival a mathematical impossibility. While the horizon glows with the fire of a global struggle, a different kind of war is being waged in total silence behind the stone walls of a country estate. This is a battle where the primary weapon is not iron or lead, but the terrifying complexity of a machine that can change its mind 150 trillion times a day. If you fail to solve the puzzle by tonight, the board is wiped clean and the loss begins all over again. The odds are stacked so heavily against human intuition that logic itself suggests we have already lost. The Enigma was not just a device. It was a mechanical labyrinth designed to be unsolvable. To the eyes of those who intercepted its signals, it was a chaotic stream of gibberish, a digital ghost that haunted the airwaves. Each letter typed into its keyboard was scrambled through a series of rotors and a complex plug board, emerging as something entirely different. The brilliance of the design lay in its fluidity. Because the rotors turned with every keystroke, the same letter would never be encrypted the same way twice in a single message. It was a shifting landscape of logic, where the ground moved beneath your feet with every step you took. In the late 1930s, as the shadow of conflict stretched across Europe, the British government established a secret headquarters at Bletchley Park. They gathered the most brilliant minds the country had to offer: linguists, chess champions, and classicists. They were told to do the impossible. Inside the cramped, drafty confines of Hut 8, the air is thick with the smell of stale tobacco and the ozone of electrical currents. The walls are lined with chalkboard equations that look more like ancient spells than modern science. Amidst this chaos stands Alan Turing. He is a man who does not fit the mold of a wartime hero. He is awkward, his fingernails are bitten to the quick, and he speaks in a staccato rhythm of pure logic. While others attempt to break the enigma through manual linguistic patterns, Turing stares at the ceiling, listening to the invisible rhythm of the rotors. He understands a truth his superiors refuse to accept. You cannot defeat a machine with a human brain. To defeat a machine, you must build a god out of gears and copper wire. The tension at Bletchley is a living thing. Every tick of the clock on the wall feels like a hammer blow against a coffin lid. Outside, in the freezing Atlantic, merchant ships are being hunted by wolf packs of submarines, guided by the very signals these scholars are failing to read. The pressure from the high command is unrelenting, yet Turing remains fixated on his bombe, a massive electromechanical device designed to cycle through the Enigma's settings at high speed. His colleagues are skeptical, bordering on hostile. They see a man spending precious time and money on a pile of clicking rotors and tangled wires while the world outside is burning. The conflict is not just between nations. It is a civil war within the huts, between the old guard of manual cryptanalysis and the dawn of the machine age. Every day, the team starts at zero. At midnight, the German military changes the rotor settings, the plug board positions, and the ground keys. Everything they learned the day before is incinerated. Turing stands before his machine, the bombe, watching the drums spin. Click-clack, click-clack. It is the sound of failure, repeated thousands of times a minute. The machine whirs, searches for a contradiction, finds none, and continues its blind march through the permutations. The frustration in the room is enough to suffocate. A colleague screams that they are wasting their lives on a mechanical fantasy. Turing doesn't even blink. He is calculating the probability of a human error in a system designed for perfection. He is looking for the ghost in the machine. The psychological toll is immense. These are men and women who live in a state of perpetual high-stakes failure. Imagine the weight of knowing that the information you are trying to reach could save 10,000 sailors, yet it remains just out of reach because a single rotor was in the wrong position. Turing himself became a figure of intense scrutiny. His social awkwardness and refusal to play the political games of the military hierarchy made him an easy target for blame. Yet, he persisted with a singular, almost obsessive focus. He knew that the math didn't lie, even when the people around him were losing faith. He was a man out of time, fighting a war that hadn't yet been named, a war of information. The breakthrough, when it finally arrived, was not a sudden explosion of light, but a quiet, almost pathetic realization of a human flaw. The Enigma, for all its perfection, was operated by humans, and humans are creatures of habit. Sitting in a local pub, amidst the clinking of glasses and the low hum of weary soldiers, Turing listens to a young woman talk about her work intercepting German radio signals. She mentions a specific operator who always begins his messages with the same few letters, perhaps a repetitive greeting. Turing freezes. The Germans are predictable. They send weather reports at the same time every morning. They end every message with a specific, mandated phrase. By feeding these predictable snippets of text into the bombe, they could give the machine a starting point. They weren't looking for the whole needle. They were looking for the tip. Turing sprints back to the hut, his coat flapping in the wind. He recalibrates the bombe, feeding it the cribs, the predictable phrases. The rotors begin to spin, faster and louder than ever before. The room held its breath. The clicking is no longer a heartbeat of frustration. It is the rhythm of a hidden power coming to life. Suddenly, the machine stops with a heavy metallic thud. A silence falls over Hut 8 that is more deafening than the previous noise. Turing reaches for the printout with trembling hands. The gibberish begins to melt away, replaced by clear, concise German commands. The positions of the U-boats, the targets for the night, the secret heart of the enemy's navy is laid bare on a scrap of paper. For a moment, there is a jubilant roar, but it is quickly silenced by a chilling realization. Solving the code was only the beginning of a much darker dilemma. Once they could read the messages, they faced a choice that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. If they used the information to stop every attack, the enemy would realize the Enigma had been compromised. They would change the rotors, add a fourth wheel, or rewrite the entire system, rendering years of work useless. To win the long war, the codebreakers had to allow some losses to occur. This is the ultimate shadow of the Bletchley project. Turing and his team became silent spectators to tragedies they had the power to prevent. They sat in their wooden huts, reading the coordinates of upcoming strikes, and had to calculate the statistical probability of intervention. If the intervention looked too lucky, the secret would be out. Imagine the room when the intelligence comes in. A convoy is heading directly into a trap. Hundreds of men are about to die. One of the codebreakers, a young man named Peter, stares at the transcript in horror. His brother is on one of those ships. He begs Turing to send a warning, but the orders from the top are cold and mathematical. To save the brother is to lose the war. Turing looks at the boy, his eyes reflecting a terrible, mechanical coldness. They have to play God with the lives of their own people, deciding which ships would be saved and which would be allowed to fall, all to protect the secret of their success. They were forced into a logic that mirrored the machine they had defeated. The morality of the situation was a gray fog, where the preservation of the ultra-secret became more important than the immediate reality of the conflict. Alan Turing's contribution changed the trajectory of human history, likely shortening the struggle by years and saving millions of lives. However, the end of the conflict did not bring him the recognition he deserved. Because the work at Bletchley Park was classified under the Official Secrets Act, his achievements were buried in archives. He returned to a world that had no idea what he had done. He walked the streets of London as a ghost, carrying the weight of 1,000,000 lives in his head, forbidden from telling a soul. The man who had cracked the most complex code in the world found himself trapped by a social code that was even more unyielding. The legacy of the Enigma and the birth of the computer age is one of profound irony. The technology that was built to protect secrets ended up laying the foundation for a world where information is the most valuable commodity. Turing's vision of a universal machine, a device that could be programmed to do anything, is the reason we live in a digital reality today. Yet the cost of that vision was a life lived in the shadows. He was eventually targeted by the very system he had helped preserve, his personal life viewed as a threat to the rigid structures of the time. The silence that followed the war for the Bletchley team was perhaps the hardest part. They carried the weight of the lives they saved and the lives they sacrificed in total isolation. As we look back at the whirring rotors of the bombe and the frantic atmosphere of Bletchley Park, we see the beginning of the modern era. We see the moment when the human spirit realized it could no longer handle the sheer volume of data the world produces. We handed over the keys to the machines, hoping they would guide us through the darkness. The Enigma was broken, but in doing so, we opened a door to a future where the line between human intuition and algorithmic certainty becomes thinner every day. Today, the Enigma machines sit in museums, their brass rotors polished and still. They look like relics of a simpler time, yet they represent the beginning of the complex, encrypted world we inhabit. Every time we send an encrypted message or log into a secure server, we are using the descendants of the logic developed in those silent huts. The battle for information never truly ended. It just moved into a different frequency. The risk and the conflict remain the same. The struggle to understand the hidden patterns of the world before the clock strikes midnight and the board resets. In the end, the story of the Enigma code is about the friction between innovation and tradition, between the need for secrecy and the desire for truth. It is about the heavy burden of knowledge and the ethical minefields that come with having the power to see the future. As we move further into an age defined by artificial intelligence and complex algorithms, the lessons of Bletchley Park resonate more than ever. We must ask ourselves if we are the masters of our machines, or if we are merely trying to keep up with the codes they are creating for us. The shadow of the secret still lingers over the landscape of modern intelligence. It reminds us that the most significant events in history often happen in rooms where no one is allowed to speak, driven by people whose names we may not know until it is far too late. Alan Turing's story is a testament to the power of the individual mind against the overwhelming force of a system. He didn't just solve a puzzle, he redefined the limits of what is possible. He showed that even the most unbreakable system has a flaw, usually hidden in the human element that operates it. In the dark thriller of the mid-20th century, the hero wasn't a soldier on the front lines, but a man in a rumpled suit, staring at a wall of wires, waiting for a machine to tell him the truth. He was the architect of a new age, a man who broke the unbreakable, yet could not find a place for himself in the world he helped rescue. The complexity of the world continues to grow, and the unbreakable systems of today are far more sophisticated than anything the mid-century engineers could have dreamed of. Yet the fundamental tension remains. We are still searching for the human flaw in the perfect code, the predictable pattern in the chaos. We are still racing against a clock that resets every time we think we have the answer. The Enigma was just the first chapter in a much longer thriller, one that we are all still participating in, whether we realize it or not. The machines are getting faster, the codes are getting deeper, and the stakes have never been higher. As the final rotors of this history click into place, we are left with the image of a man riding his bicycle through the English countryside, carrying the secrets of the world in his head. He looks up at the sky, perhaps seeing the patterns of the stars as a different kind of encryption. The enigma was solved. The war was won. But the mystery of the human condition remains the one code that even the most powerful machine may never truly crack. The silence of Bletchley Park has long since been broken, but the echoes of its clicking machines still vibrate through the foundations of our digital lives. A constant reminder of the day we learned how to think like a machine to save the soul of humanity. The board has been wiped clean, but the game is still being played, and the midnight deadline is closer than it appears.